What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Glass Note podcast. Real quick before we get rolling, mark your calendars for August 6th to 8th and make sure you join us at TCS Live, hockey's premier coaching event. This year's edition of TCS Live will be taking place in Edmonton, specifically at the Ice District, home of the Oilers, and hosted alongside the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, the U18 World Championships featuring the next generation of NHL superstars. TCS Live is where passionate coaches of all levels come together to share ideas, build community, and ensure they are equipped with the latest tactics and strategies heading into next season. Last year, over 500 coaches representing 14 countries joined us at the University of Michigan, and with a limited capacity at this year's event in Edmonton, TCS Live will sell out. Our early bird discount expires at midnight Eastern on April 15th. Coaches Site subscribers receive a $100 discount to TCS Live just for being a member of TCS. And with the early bird discount, you save a total of $150. Plus, if you use the code GLASSANOUT at registration, you will receive an additional 10% off your ticket to TCS Live. Again, at the time of this recording, you have less than a week to access these savings. Presenters include Jeff Almer, assistant coach of the San Jose Sharks, Andrew Lord, head coach of the Ontario Reign, Danielle Fujita, skating coach of the Calgary Flames, Daniel Bachner, development coach for the Carolina Hurricanes, and Jonathan Sigalet of Sigalet Hockey, whose client list includes Jake Sanderson and Zach Borensky, and many more to come. With the NHL season winding down, we will have more announcements in the coming weeks, but make sure you save now by registering today at thecoachesitelive.com. And remember, listeners of the Glass Note podcast can save an additional 10% by using the code GLASSANOUT at checkout. This offer is available for a limited time. I hope to see you there. TCS Live is a blast, and it's the highlight of the off season. And now, on to the show. What's the number one rule to being a stick boy?
Probably do what you're told. No, I think the number one rule is kind of get along with everybody and obviously work hard. Those were some of the best days of my life. The memories and the people that you come across, and quite honestly, like all those players that came through Providence in that time frame, I still talk to quite a few of them, and it's amazing. It's amazing when you've gone from a stick boy to coaching, how much like your path crosses with guys like that. Andy Hilbert was around our rink at Windy City all the time, and Colton Orr was running a team in Danbury, and when I was at South Kent, so he and I would talk, and then Brendan Walsh is a cop in Boston, and he and I still text back and forth. So it's funny, like the relationships I made when I was 12, 13, 14 to 18. I still keep in touch with those guys, and it's hilarious now that they're like, holy smokes, Wardo, like you're coaching. So it's been really fun to kind of see how that's evolved.
How did that opportunity present itself?
It's actually quite funny. I was a season ticket holder the year the Providence Bruins won the Calder Cup 98-99. Peter Laviolette and Bill Armstrong were the coaches. And I used to sit next to the visiting team bench, and there was this guy who his nickname was the Heckler, and he would just give it to the visiting team, and I kind of sat with him like his little protege. And finally, 2 years passed, and Bob Paquette, one of the old locker room attendants, said, "Hey, we're sick of you giving it to the visiting team, so can you come down here and help us out?" So that kind of started it. And then Mike Sullivan, or Bill Armstrong, was the head coach with Scott Gordon. And then Mike Sullivan took over. And then Scott Gordon became the head coach. And Scott and I have always had a great relationship. And, he started doing video. And then I went off to Bowling Green and as a student manager and started doing video at Bowling Green. And then when Scott got the New York Islander job, he took me on as his video coach. So that's kind of, honestly, it was so, it was lucky. It was completely lucky. And everything since then has been quite the adventure.
Well, it's interesting. So my best pal from high school, Jason Kennedy. His son Nash was the stick boy and assistant equipment manager for the Kamloops Blazers for forever. His younger brother does it now. And so Nash is now doing the sports management program at Brock. But, just in talking with his dad, he's like, he learned how to grind in that role. He's like, his work ethic and how he kind of approaches life probably he learned more in that locker room than he did from going to school. And so, I mean, I could just imagine that you probably don't even realize half the lessons that you're soaking in.
No, it's funny. I did sport management at Bowling Green when I went to school, and it's amazing when I grew up in the locker room from when I was 13 years old till I was 18. Like I didn't do the things that normal high school kids did on Fridays and Saturdays. I was working at the rink. I was up till 4 a.m. You wake up at 7, and you just you're grinding. And luckily for me, we had a small staff. It was just the head equipment manager, myself. So I was, kind of doing everything. And then as I got older, I started going on the road. And so the lessons you take from that, from like work ethic and, just seeing you really by osmosis, even, for me, I always was in tune with the coach's messaging and watching the meetings. And, when video started to become popular, really got intrigued in that. And you learn so much of your identity as a person. And I'm really fortunate because even the players, like, seeing what they went through as far as, getting called up to Boston or sent down and the different struggles that they had. It's a huge pay cut getting sent down to the AHL and how people dealt with that. And, just kind of seeing the day to day of what the emotions that people go through. That was a huge lesson too. And for me being, in a position to kind of take it all in and the people that you learn from that you don't even know, like Mike Sullivan, it was his first year as a head coach right out of playing. And Sully probably gave me some of the best advice I've ever had the year we won the Clark Cup when he was coaching in Pittsburgh. So just the relationships you make that you have no idea are going to come back down the road. It was amazing. And it's almost like hitting the lottery. I've been so fortunate to have been surrounded by unbelievable people and build relationships that have lasted for decades.
Okay, well, that was quite the cliffhanger there. What was the advice that Sully gave you?
I know it was funny. We went to Fargo and we went up 2-0, which I think no one expected. So we ended up sweeping on the road, and then we had to wait a week when we came home to play game 3 in Youngstown. Yeah. So I called Sully and I said, I just asked him, like, hey, you've done this. Like, we have 4 or 5 days. Like, what would your advice be? And he said, listen, the first 10 minutes, he's like, just stay in the moment. The first 10 minutes, get every single puck behind their D and just go to work. He goes, the first 10 minutes are going to dictate the game. And if you guys are nervous or you're dipping your toe in, then you're not going to have any success. And to be honest with you, that week, I think we took 3 days off. We didn't practice Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. We skated Thursday for 25 minutes. And on Friday, we had an optional morning skate like we always did. And the message was, hey, listen, like, enjoy the moment, stay in the moment. Who cares what they do? It's all about us. In the first 10 minutes, everything's going to go behind their D and we're just going to go to work.
You guys win that game 1-0 and you don't score until I think the beginning of the third period. I mean, it's great to get that advice from Sully, but I mean, just as a young coach, I mean, just looking at your background, you hadn't been in that moment before. So you're Sure. going through it for the first time, like the players. What did you learn about composure?
Yeah, I think, and for myself, I'm an emotional guy. Like you care so much and you live and die with your players. And I think anyone I've ever coached, like, will tell you, like, you're so passionate about it. But I think at that time there was it was a calming, it was a calm atmosphere. Like we knew, and until you go through it and you win, like, you don't understand, but the team kind of was on cruise control for the last few weeks. Like the leadership was unbelievable. And I think in that moment, like, I could have done really nothing but screw it up. So you kind of let the you let the guys do what they've always done. You stick with your routine. You don't change anything about what's been going on. And you certainly have to be steady on the rudder as far as, your game plan and how you approach the emotions. And it's funny, we used to, every time the game was tied going into the third period or overtime, we would run the play that Quinnipiac ran when they won the national championship.
Oh yeah.
So I used to walk into the locker
Like
room,
off every opening faceoff.
every opening faceoff,
No way.
whether it was tied in the third or we were going into overtime. I would walk in the room and I would wave a towel above my head and say, "Boys, you know what time it is." And we called it the Bobcat. And the funny thing is about game 3 is we ran that face-off play. We didn't connect on it, but we got into the zone. And then they turned the puck over and we scored right away. So really, we didn't connect on the play, but the play got us into the offensive zone. So it was just something that everybody knew, like, okay, we're tied going into the third. We're running the Bobcat. Andon Sorbonne, who now plays at Quinnipiac, was on the ice. And it was just something that was us. Like, we would go into the third period, we'd crank some music, and I'd come in waving a towel, and the guys it was like we knew what was going on. So that's kind of how that all unfolded.
Love that. And so, is there something to be said? Listen, we all want the play we draw up to come to life on the ice. It doesn't always happen, but in those moments when you're just trying to manage the game, is there something to be said to say, hey, like, we're going to take, in a really tight situation, there's probably a lot of nerves at play. We're going to give the players something to focus on out of the gates just to get them back in the deep end and into it.
Certainly. And like for us, it was less about the play or it was more about the routine of it, right? Like we had been in overtime against Cedar Rapids. We had been in overtime against Chicago. We had been obviously in close games throughout the playoffs. We had been in overtime against Fargo already in game 2. So it was more like, okay, we've been here, we've done this, we've been through it. We're going to stick to exactly what we know how to do. And that's what we did. And obviously the play didn't connect, but we got into the zone and they turned the puck over and Bonesy scored a beautiful goal. And to be honest with you, the way we were generating a decent amount of scoring chances that game. Obviously both goalies were on their toes, but when we scored that goal, I think everybody felt really confident that Jacob was in the zone. And, we were pretty confident that was going to be enough to win us that game.
Yeah, I can't help but think your first foray into coaching is with the New York Islanders. Like, you're in an NHL coaching room, and you're the video coach. But I would think that, like, you're probably just on a daily basis. Scott Gordon, the head coach, assistant coaches are coming into you, and they're just obsessing over the details. They're obsessing over every face-off, and how much that experience must have rubbed off on you, and perhaps your attention to detail today.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, like completely honest with you, I had no idea what I was doing. It was, I did video my last 2 years in college, and
with the D1 program at Bowling Green.
Bowling Green, yeah. With Scott Pollock, and we weren't very good, but Todd Reardon was our assistant coach. He was super detailed. We spent a lot of time together, but it was nothing compared to the NHL. I have so many stories about that, but it was back, and that was at a time where right now you can click on, you can go on Sportlogic, you can go on Instat and pull up anything you want in 2 seconds. Back then, I remember I had a rack of like probably 8 DVD recorders and 4 satellites on the top of the Nassau Coliseum. So like I was at the mercy of analog video. So I actually had to record and then import into my computer in real time, and then break everything down. So the process of pre-scouting and getting the actual clips and video, it was probably 300 times what it is now, if not more. So having really no clue what you're doing, there were nights, I remember I slept at the Nassau Coliseum more than I slept at my apartment. And just trying to figure out what I was doing. And to be honest with you, I had to share a computer with one of our assistant coaches. So I didn't even get to do my work, at the most opportune time. So, you're sitting
Come
there and
on.
it's a different world. Yeah. So, when you're in it and you're trying to get all the technology stuff down, and then on top of it, I remember asking Scott Gordon my first year in the NHL what F3 meant. Like honestly, like that's, and then you start to learn all that, and then by the end of it, you're pre-scouting thousands of games, and you start to come in tune with what everything means, and that's how green I was at the beginning. And I think without the steps that I had to go through as far as like the video coaching process, understanding what each coach wanted, like without doing that, you learn so much, right? Like just by osmosis, like just getting, understanding what everyone's looking for and understanding the game way better. And when you're pre-scouting, I could have told you back then, all 30 NHL coaches what their system was, the details in their system, what we would do to break it. Like looking back at that, that's how I learned. And because at the end of the day, if Peter Laviolette's playing a 1-3-1, we're trying to break it, right? So now not only do you know what the details of a 1-3-1 are, but you know what you're going to do to counteract it. So as spending 6 years in the NHL as a video coach, all of those games and those thousands of pre-scouts, you start to become a pretty detailed coach yourself just because you know what you're looking for.
So we've had a few coaches on the show that at some point in their career sat in the video room. What was the most stressful moment of your time in the NHL? Just from when you talk about this, there's just so much that can go wrong, and I'm sure the players and the other coaches on the staff, they don't want to hear "Hey guys, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just figuring it out." They just want to get it done.
Yeah, I would say I think at the beginning the technology was the most stressful because the technology was not where it is today, where it's so redundant and you can get things so fast. Back then, if one of the wires came out of, we had these old Canopus analog boxes, and if one of the wires was moved or it would stop the capture and you would lose the whole period. So then now you don't have anything after the period, and your guys are coming in saying, "What happened on the second goal? Did you see that chance at 13 minutes?" And you're like, "Yeah, the feed cut out." So that was super stressful. And then, as it grew, when you're a video coach in the modern Hawkeye day, the stressful moments are every offsides, every shot on net, like goalie interference, offsides challenges. Those become stressful. I remember a hilarious story where we were in San Jose. I was working for Mike Babcock with the Leafs, and I believe Erik Karlsson kind of took a puck in the zone backwards, and the question was whether he had possession or not. And I said, "I think that's offside." So we challenged it. They called it a good goal, and Babs came in, and he wasn't really happy with. I think he said I made him look like a dipshit on national TV or something. But no, I think it. The stresses they're different every day. But as a video coach, obviously having the material is number one. Like having the right information is really, really important, and making sure you have that. Now, as technology has improved, you've been able to obviously see how quick things are brought to light.
What did you think you wanted to do when you enrolled at Bowling Green?
You know what? It's a great question. I was going to go to law school.
Got it.
I wanted to work in management. I wanted to work in an agency.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that was my plan. I was at Bowling Green, and I never went home in the summer. I always took summer classes, and I worked out there. So I was on track to graduate in December of my senior year, so 3.5 years.
Yeah.
But I needed an internship in the second half in order to get my degree. So, my plan was I was going to take my LSATs in September,
Yeah.
and then I was going to do my internship with Scott Gordon in Providence. And then I was going to go to law school the following fall. So when I called Scott Gordon to ask if I could do an internship in Providence with him, he said, obviously that's not a problem. He's like, but just hang on a couple weeks. I'll give you a call back. So I was actually in Florida at my dad's house, and I was studying for my LSATs. And Scott Gordon called me and said, hey, you can do an internship, but it's not going to be with the Providence Bruins. And I said, okay. He said, I just got the New York Islanders head coaching job. He said, do you want to be our video coach? And I said, well, I don't graduate till December. And he said, no problem. We'll hold the job for you till December. And I'm like, wait, like this is a real job, not just an internship. And he said, yeah, he's like, I want you to come be our video coach. So I put off the LSATs and I went. I remember taking my final on, I don't know, December 9th or 10th or 11th. And then the next day we had a game against Washington. So I took my last final. I loaded up my car. I drove all night to Long Island. I got in my shoebox apartment that I had never seen before. And I slept on the floor for about 2 hours. And then I went to the Nassau Coliseum and that's kind of where it began.
Man, that is wild.
Yeah.
What did mom and dad say when you told them, like, I'm not doing the LSATs or I'm not doing the legal thing? I'm going to video coach.
My parents were always great with, like, I spent a lot of time, like I didn't go my senior year. I didn't go to high school a lot. I worked it out with my principal in Lakeville, Mass, a good old Apponequet Regional High School. I worked it out where we did some work study things. So I was able to actually spend a lot of time at the rink, and I would go on the road. And so their rule to me was always, don't get in trouble and make sure, your grades are good. So I didn't really do things that normal high schoolers did. Like I was always working, like nonstop, even during the week to make money. I would, there was an outdoor skating rink in downtown Providence. It used to be called the Fleet Skating Center. And Monday through Thursday, I would go right after school and I would sharpen all the rental skates. And that's how I would make money to pay for gas to go back and forth to high school and then to the rink in Providence. So that's what I would do Monday through Thursday. And then I would go in and help the equipment manager with like laundry and stuff like that. But I never really had a problem with, the biggest thing for me was I just always kept my grade. I think I had straight A's my last 2 years of high school. And I just didn't want to fight that battle where they could ever take something away from me for not doing something that was so controllable to me. So, I never got in trouble. I never really had any issues with grades. And luckily I had a lot of understanding teachers that somehow pretty much had season tickets to all the Providence Bruins games. But I never really had an issue with that. So my parents were always kind of let me do my thing. Like they knew that I knew what I wanted to do. And, I actually was originally planning on being an equipment manager after college. Until the LSAT thing, like until I decided what I wanted to do. But when I was in high school, I always said, after I graduate, I'll come back and be the equipment manager. But as things evolved in college and I got into video and into the coaching side of it, it kind of organically happened. And then obviously Scott Gordon offered me that job. So it was a wild kind of turn of events.
Oh man, talk about a rink rat.
Yeah.
So at what point does your vision shift to like, hey, like all paths lead to being the guy standing behind the bench?
Yeah. I think you can probably pinpoint it right around my second year with the Islanders. We hired Scott Allen, who's now an assistant with Washington, who's been, Scotty was such a great influence for me. I think he's probably coached for 35, 40 years now, and he's never been without a job. And to me, that is such an amazing accomplishment as a coach, because it's so volatile. And I just remember Scotty being so real and so down to earth. And he used to tell me, like, hey, like coaching's coaching, man. Like you can coach. Like you just got to buy your time and pay your dues and work hard. And Dean Chanel was on staff too. Same thing. We had a great staff. I know we didn't have the results that we would have wanted to have, but our staff was so tight. Like Scotty Allen, Scott Gordon, Dean Chanel, Sudsy Maharaj, like those guys, we spent so much time together, and it was so awesome. Just being in the locker room and learning from those guys, and they were just such good men, such good mentors. So that's when I started to really just look at, and we weren't having success, and I think that kind of breeds questions about like, oh, what would you do, or what would I do different, or what's wrong, what's the problem, what would the solution be, and I think that's I've always liked the challenge of like leading people. It's always been something that's come natural to me. Like I don't, it's you're not afraid of it. You want it. You want the responsibility. I feel like that's innate to some people, and that was something that I was never shy with. But then really figuring out like, what am I going to do? Like, how is that going to happen? Like, I played 3 years of competitive hockey, and it wasn't even very competitive, to be honest. I was
Yeah.
not very good. I was actually terrible. I'm probably a better skater now than I was at 16 years old, which isn't saying much, trust me. But
I can relate to that. I can relate to that.
yeah. So, but I just remember thinking like, you know what, this is a very fulfilling thing to do. Like you don't feel like you're working a job, and you wanted to make an impact on people's lives. And I think for me, figuring out how I was going to go about that was more difficult than figuring out that was what I wanted to do. Um, and to be honest with you, it was a little bit of a kind of stroke of luck that even happened. But it probably my second year with the Islanders, and then Scott Gordon got fired and Jack Capuano came on, and Cappy was great to work for. And, so you just learn so much from different people. And the content is never something I was uncomfortable with. It was more like, okay, how am I going to get my foot in the door to actually do this?
You go from the Islanders. I'd love to touch on your experience with Team USA at the World Championships, but you go to work with the Toronto Marlies. You mentioned the experience with Babs, but when I look at the program that you've built in Youngstown and how your team plays and the identity, I can't help but think that the experience of, first stepping behind the bench with the Soo Greyhounds, working under Drew Bannister, Kyle Raftis, and just how that program was kind of built around creativity and skill, how influential that must have been at that stage in your career.
Yeah, it's funny. There was probably one of the biggest breaks I ever gotten. Before we get to that, my wife and I, we decided that we were going to get married and start our family, and we moved to Newport, Rhode Island,
Yeah.
and I ended up leaving the Islanders, and I took a job with the Exos as a sales manager for the Northeast region.
Yeah.
Before I went to the Marlies, and that summer, we had got married, bought a house, and I got a phone call in September or early October, and it was someone from the high school in Newport, and it was the Rogers High School athletic director, and they said, "Hey, listen, we know that you just got done with the New York Islanders. We need a coach, otherwise the program's going to fold." And I was like, "No, no, no, I'm done coaching." And they're like, "Well, we have a lot of really good kids that won't be able to play hockey." So I said, "All right, I'll do it." So I ended up coaching a co-op team, Rogers, Rocky Hill, and Tiverton High School. And I believe the team won 4 games the year before. But we had such an amazing group of kids, and we ended up winning like 18 games that year. And that was actually what kind of started the whole thing, is how much I loved it. The kids, I mean, the kids got so much better. We actually we lost in a shootout in the semifinals of the Rhode Island State Tournament at Mount St. Charles. And that's when I was like, you know what, like this is something that I really, really want to do. So I ended up coaching at URI the next year with Joe Augustine, and I was still working. I was still working in sales, and then Kyle Dubas called me, and my wife said, "Hey, listen, you can't, like, you got to go back to hockey. I'm sick of having you in the house like this." So that's kind of, before that all started, that was probably the biggest moment for me as far as understanding about wanting to be a coach. And then obviously I go to the Marlies, you go to the Leafs, and then my first bench job with Drew Bannister. And that was, I mean, that Drew is an unbelievable coach, and the whole system we had, the whole program we had in Sault Ste. Marie was unbelievable. And there are a lot of parallels between what we did there and here in Youngstown.
Well, I imagine, I mean, for somebody who clearly loves to immerse themselves in hockey, no better place to do that, I would think, than the Soo. But just to be clear, like when you leave the Islanders, you're like, I'm getting married, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to plant some roots, and I'm going to be a corporate guy for forever. And then it changes. And man, what's your wife's name?
My wife's name's Jessica.
Oh man. Well, kudos, Jessica. Like what, I think that's another thing we learn on the show all the time, man. Like, your partner, who you pick as a partner, is so critical to any career in coaching.
Yeah, she's the most important person. I think we've gone through 13 moves now. My oldest is 12, and he's lived in 8 different places. So the people you have beside you are the most important ones for sure.
Totally. So you just through watching that amount of tape, and it's funny you mentioned Exos. So years ago, I was an assistant coach in Penticton in the BCHL. And so it was Fred Harbinson, who's still the coach there. It's his first year. And we were really, really lucky that one of our part owners was the guy that wrote the initial software for Exos, and it was acquired. So like we're a junior A team, and we got handed this $30,000 piece of software that I think at that time, like it was really just NHL teams that were using it, and we had to learn how to use it. But man, like I learned more. Like we watched every single game together as a staff, either right after the game or early the next morning. I learned more through that process than I had in the previous decade. What were some of the things, when you look at who you are as a coach today, what are some of those sort of ingrained things that were instilled in you during that period?
Yeah, I think, listen, like being able to effectively communicate. I mean, as these players have gotten older, the video component and the technology component and seeing themselves has taken such a front seat on as to how they learn. So I think, as far as, that side of it, that's been huge. And working with different people and learning how to present and having concise and clear messages, has been probably the biggest key as a teacher. But when it comes to the biggest takeaways of those early years and learning, it's really just about developing an identity of who you want your team to be and what you want your organization to be. To me, all the creativity and the playmaking and the structure and the systems, that's all wonderful. But if you don't have the foundational identity of what you want, and that's clear cut, on how you compete and how you play the game every day, and the identity of what your team should be, and you don't communicate that concisely and like revisit it every single day, that to me, if you don't have that, you're never going to have a foundation to build the house on. We always talk about it here in Youngstown that our identity as a team, we want to be in your face, we want to be gritty, we want to make sure that we play the game a certain way. And we go back to that every single day. The first video session of every single week is always about identity, whether it's blocking shots, finishing checks, winning net fronts, winning races, winning back checks, stick detail, things that are completely controllable by our work ethic, compete level, coachability, and willingness to be a good teammate. Like, and just being excited. Like, we go back to it every single first video session of every week, is all about our identity. And that's what we want to make sure that we are, that's the foundation of our house. And without the foundation, you can't put the shingles on, you can't put the nice light fixtures in and the granite countertops. Like, you have none of that without the foundation of the house being solid as a rock. And that, to me, like those early days, like seeing, I've said this a bunch, but my biggest thing as a coach is 1+1 = 3. Like, I know what I think I want, and then you learn from everybody else, and you bring part of their philosophy into your own, and then now all of a sudden you have a new philosophy. And I try to make sure that that's a little bit like that every year. And fortunate for me, I've been able to work with people who are going to be in the Hall of Fame, who are some of the best coaches ever to coach hockey. And to be able to just have that contextual frame of reference in my mind at all times, there's really very little experiences that I can't draw from to say, like, oh yeah, I remember something like this. Like, this is what we can do. So I think that's the biggest thing, like, and something that we try to build here in Youngstown with how we treat each other and the way we approach every day in our business every day and our work ethic is just the identity of what we want to be to the organization. And I would say that's probably the biggest sticking point from those early years, is learning how to build that.
I'm curious, you talk about those first video sessions of the week. Are those showing primarily like positive clips, or the team or players doing it right? Or is that, maybe picking out some misses and highlighting that?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, and I tell my guys this all the time, like, when we do video, you take the jersey off, take the numbers off the back, right? Like, it's not to call out anyone individually, it's to fix mistakes that we all make as a group. And I think really it just depends on how you're going. Like, we try to foster an environment here where it's a family. Like, if even with myself, like, sometimes the captains will come into my office and say, hey, you got to lighten up, or hey, we're tired, like, we need a lighter week. Like, you have to create an environment that everybody trusts each other, that they have each other's best interest in mind. And I know that sounds so cliche, but one of the reasons why we've been able to have success in Youngstown is because the guys here truly embrace that. Like, everybody knows that we're not here to use each other to get to the next level, and we're fully submerged in what we're doing today. And so when it comes down to the video sessions, it's, hey, if we're playing really well and we're on top of people, and there's a lot to be celebrated, we celebrate it. And every day there are positives of doing it right, and there are celebrations of blocking big shots or making big saves or great box outs, or whatever it may be, the little things might be. But there are plenty of teaching points too, and that's all they are. It's not calling anyone out. It's not, and some people might feel that way individually, and you make sure that you handle them a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, like, it's just, what do we have to do today to make sure that the next time we step on the ice together, we're putting our best foot forward. And sometimes there's a lot of positives, and those are the best teaching things. Like, teaching through positivity is always the best. But if you let things go and you don't address things, especially right away, like, just get it out of the way and move on, right? And so I believe catching them doing it right is the most powerful tool that you can have. But there are some things that you clean up and you move on, and you just say, hey, like, these are areas that we just all have to clean up and make sure we're looked after.
Ryan, I'm just, it's so funny, right? Like, you never know where some of the decisions you make, particularly in this career, are going to take you. But I think, like, just looking at your resume, there's been like two to me that sort of stand out. And one is, you're in the Soo, and you make the decision to go with Drew Bannister to San Antonio in the American League, but as a video coach. And again, as just somebody that's viewing this on your elite prospects profile, that stood out to me. Like, that must have been a big decision on whether you find another role, in an assistant coaching, or a role where you're on the bench, to going back to being a video coach.
Yeah, I think that like, the going with Drew is one of my biggest mentors, and it was Drew's first pro job. And truthfully, I loved working with Drew, and the opportunity to go with him and try to do whatever I could to help him have success. I felt like that was the right thing to do. And, staying in the Soo without Drew would have been a little different, and not to say it would have been a bad thing, but I just felt like at that time, that was going to be the right thing to do. And to be honest with you, have the opportunity to live in Texas and coach hockey, like it was something new and something completely different. But at the same time, like that wasn't really a video coach role. Like that was more of an assistant coach.
Got it.
And I knew the responsibility I would have with Drew. I understood that, at that point I could do video in my sleep. So like that was more of I felt like I could grow from that role. And I know being with someone that I trust 100% and someone that I look up to and someone that gave me my first opportunity, being able to help him and, create a level of comfort where I knew the day-to-day process that he wanted to go through. And I just felt like that was the right thing to do. And honestly, it was 100% the right thing to do. Being with the St. Louis Blues and that organization, from top to bottom, how professional they are and how well they treat their people. It was a great decision. We had a wonderful year in San Antonio. And after that year, I had to make a really hard decision to go to South Kent, because that was my first head coaching job. And honestly, like, it's funny, like you do look back and you wonder if you made the right decisions. And you always say, I wonder if I would have done this. It's like a Goosebumps book. Turn to page 18, turn to page 24.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, like it is. And you always wonder when you're in it. Like when I got to South Kent, it was something I was completely uncomfortable with. The environment of not having been in pro or major junior hockey was very different. I coached a star-studded U15 team, but being in the environment with the prep school environment was very, very different. But looking back on it, as much as you think about while you're in it, you're like, wow, this is way different. And you're living on a prep school campus in the middle of nowhere. My wife wanted to kill me. But looking back on that, there is no chance at all I would A, be in Youngstown right now, or B, have had any of the success that we've had.
Well, I'm so glad I asked you that, because generally around this time of year, I start getting a lot of DMs or text messages and emails from predominantly young coaches that are like, hey, like looking for some advice on the next step in their career. And I always say, like, don't get caught in the trap of going after the title or the level. Like, hook your wagon to the right people and people you're going to learn from and people that are going to look out for you too. And I mean, I just from hearing your story, Ryan, like, I mean, it sounds like without Scott Gore and Drew Bannister, I mean, you had a lot of really good humans in your corner. And I think that, and we've learned that in this gig, like that means that trumps any sort of title or prestige you might think that you're moving towards. So love that. I'd also be curious, like, given that, you didn't play at a particularly high level, like how valuable has been the opportunity to go back and coach, high school hockey in New York, club hockey in Rhode Island, prep school. You go to Tri-Cities and you're director of player development, but you're also in charge of creating a grassroots program, like just being able to, become a teacher of those fundamentals and getting those reps in. How important has that been?
Yeah, it's been the most important thing because you're doing things that you're completely uncomfortable with. And for me, it's you know, learning how to teach fundamentals. Like that's the root of it. When you're coaching pro, they know how to pass the puck, they know how to shoot the puck, they
Totally.
know, so having to go back and learn how to teach and be a teacher is the most important thing. And additionally, like having the patience to see development through, right? So, everybody's in a rush to win, player development's a buzzword, but how many people actually have the patience to see it through? Like when you're coaching youth hockey, like South Kent, we had David Goyette, Jake Rossi, Jordan Dumais, Vinny Borghese, Sean McEwen, but then we had some other players that needed to develop. Otherwise, our team wasn't going to be very good. So having to go through that and get everybody up to speed, like that's a massively important skill. The patience of making sure that you're coaching your top players and feeding them what they need to be fed, but also making sure that you're bringing along everybody is really, really important. And it's no different here. Like it's no different here, and it's to be honest with you, it's no different in the American League. It's no different in college. But I think that when you go back and you have to master steps 1, 2, and 3 before you can get to 4, and learn how to teach 1, 2, and 3 before you can teach 4, makes you a way better coach, and you have way, way more patience as far as an appreciation of what the process really is. So, when we took over CYA in Chicago, I had the 05 U15 team with Andrew Strathman and some of those guys. And we were a team that, I mean, the organization was basically in shambles just from Chicago youth hockey is really different, and we ended up losing to Jason Deskins and Honey Baked in the quarterfinals that year of the national tournament, and that was probably one of my biggest growth years as a coach, because you're working with players that aren't the top recruits going to South Kent, but you're working with local Illinois kids. We brought in some out of state kids. COVID hit. And it was really like, it was an unbelievable job of seeing like how fulfilling it is to see these kids take steps throughout the year, and at the end of the year almost surprise really everybody. So going back and going through steps 1 through 3 of teaching and becoming a teacher, and having the patience and enjoying that process is a hugely important factor in any coach's ability to coach.
Granted, it changes with the player, the level they're at. It's tough to paint every player with the same brush. When you talk about steps 1, 2, and 3, particularly just, as it relates to all the youth coaches listening, like what are some of those initial steps or areas that you would say, hey, if you can equip yourselves with the skills to teach these areas or learn these mechanics, you're going to do yourself and your players a real service?
Yeah, I think what I really like to do, and this is just my approach, is you take what you want to get to, and then you really drill it down and work backwards. So if you're talking about a breakout, how do you want to break the puck out? We're a team I've always been a believer in like small bumps and slips and things like that coming out of your zone. The more people that touch it, the more connected you are. But okay, what does that mean? So it starts with a D retrieving a puck. So what does a D have to do retrieving a puck? He has to shoulder check, he has to sprint back, he has to put his feet in the right position, and then he's got to have the proper support. So how do we support the puck? What does D2 do? What are the skills involved? So basically, with however you want to play or however you want to teach the game, what I do is I take the result of where I want to get to, and then I work backwards, and I try to break down into each minutia of skill what we need to acquire in order to get to where we want to get to. So, we start very, very, very probably rudimentary when it comes to breaking pucks out or entering the zone. Like, okay, we need to drive the middle. What does that look like? How do we drive the middle? We got to kick the puck out. When do we kick the puck out? How do we kick the puck out? Do we kick it on our forehand? Do we kick it on our backhand? Just things like that. Offensive zone. Okay, this is how we want to set up in the offensive zone. What are the skills? We need to take pucks off the wall. We need to skate on first touch. We need to learn how to protect pucks. We need to, so it's trying to make sure that you're going step by step with each individual part of the game, and then working that into your overall system of play. So if you want to, you can say that you want to break pucks out however you want, but if your players don't have the can't acquire the talent to do that, then you've got to get them there. And I do that by, breaking down each individual skill within each individual position and each individual concept that we have.
So what was really interesting in getting ready for this conversation, Ryan, was going back and listening to you when you first got hired in Youngstown. And what I took from that is that you had a plan coming in on exactly how you're going to, develop the program specifically on the player development side. But what you just described in terms of working backwards, which I think is excellent advice. But you also talk about the patience required for player development. So when you first came into Youngstown and you've got all these details and you've kind of got your vision for how you want to play and you've worked backwards, like, do you have a plan for the entire season? Is it training camp? Like, how do you create the space to not only teach the skill, but also provide the players the space for it to sink in and stick?
Yeah, so that's really it's interesting because obviously, I got the job in Youngstown and we had to change everything. Our ownership bought our practice rink, so we had to build a gym. We had to build our offices out. We had to redo both of our locker rooms, and thankfully, our ownership here and our management staff has been phenomenal in giving us the resources to have the success that we have. Because if you don't have that, then really you don't have much. So much of it comes down to being in line with your management group and ownership, and being able to have the resources to make sure the players get what they need. But you come in and you want to make sure that you're giving them all this information, and that you have a plan. Well, what I did was completely wrong when I first took this job. I had a plan. I knew what we wanted to do. We talked as a staff every week in the summer. We had our whole entire yearly schedule built out, and I completely overloaded our players with way too much information. Like 100%, I did a poor job. We started the year 2-7, and it was not very good. And we just took a step back and said, okay, this is like, we got to get back to basics. And we did that. We just started building like what I should have done at the beginning. And we just started building our identity, and this is how we want to play through all three zones. And we got back to basics, and we started to climb, and then we started to add layers to the onion as we as we went. But you need to these guys, when you say let them grow into it, like, you have to master things. And once they're ready for it, they'll tell you, they'll move on. Like, they'll be
Yeah.
bored of it. And I think that, like, for me, it was a huge lesson my first year, because we rushed into it, and you want to make an impact, and you want to prove that you were the right hire as a coach. Like, I'm willing to tell you that, or I'm willing to bet that if you had Jason Deskins on here, that I probably wasn't the most popular hire, and he really stuck his neck out for me, and that's something I'll be grateful for every day of my life. But at the end of the day, like, you want to prove people right, and you want to prove the people who don't think you're ready for it wrong. And so you come in with all these big ideas, when in the reality, you've got to put your plan in place. You got to have structure, you got to have detail, and you have to be patient with how you're building something, especially when you take something over, because it's going to take time, especially with all the extracurricular things that we had to do as far as getting our program right, from when we practiced to how we practiced to what a day-to-day schedule looks like, to getting our staffing in place appropriately, to building out our facilities. There was so much meat on the bone here to chew, that we probably rushed into a little bit at the beginning, and that was an invaluable lesson learned, especially moving forward in someone's career.
I want to go back. You made the comment about when you were hired, you perhaps weren't the most popular hire. And I mean, you certainly didn't have, the experience of being a head coach at that level. How did you promote yourself? How did you sell yourself for that job?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was, luckily, and this is probably a great lesson for any youth coach, but I've been there. So, like, I coached against Jason Deskins the entire 2 years. When I was at South Kent, it was always South Kent against the '04 Honey Baked. Like, that was a train that was coming at nationals, and then COVID canceled the national tournament. And then the next year with CYA and his '05 Honey Baked team, we had absolute battles against each other in the HPHL. So, you know, for me, getting to know Desi through those times, and him obviously coaching against me, that's what really opened the door for me in this job. And you really never know who's watching. And to be honest with you, I prepared my teams when I coached. I mean, I coached U13, I coached U15 for 2 years, and we did video every day. I showed players individual clips. I would break down every single one of our games. Um, and so it's really the same process. Like Jack Hextall will tell you right now that when I coached him at U13, the process really hasn't changed to what it is today. And I think when as a youth coach, you have such an opportunity to impact these players and just go a little bit above and beyond as far as showing video and making sure your practices are organized and you're getting there early and you're meeting with your players and you're having standards with your team. I think that doing that, you never know who's watching, and there
Yeah.
are a lot of really, really good youth coaches that to be honest, like I always look to the youth ranks when making a hire and seeing who's out there. We brought on our director of player development, Cal Kafuk, who was working in Detroit doing skills, and he's been phenomenal here with our players. So it's more about the content curriculum of what you do, and luckily for me, Desi realized that. And like I said, I'm forever grateful for the organization being willing to think outside the box. And I think it's paid off a little bit. But for me, like I think what I've tried to do my whole career is just make sure that no one has a loaded gun saying that his lack of playing experience isn't made up for by something he tried to do on his resume or gain experience through different levels of coaching. And that's really been, my goal has been to make sure that I can check every box as far as, this is what he's done to make up for things like that.
So, I mean, it's funny. I mean, you talk about you start out your first season 2-7. You're a little slow to the gates, but the punchline is you guys win a championship in year one. And it's funny. Like my understanding, like Youngstown wasn't. You guys have become a model junior hockey franchise over the last 4 years, and I know that's not just you. There's a lot of people involved in that, but it's not the obvious place to do it. And it's funny, like we've had Brock Sheehan and Dan Muse on the show, and who obviously both spent time in Chicago. And like Chicago wasn't the obvious place to win either. Like they didn't have a great rink. They're kind of the suburbs. Like there was a lot of knocks on why it shouldn't work. You guys are maybe geographically, a bit of an outlier in the league footprint. But my question would be like, outside of the new dressing room and the practice rink and all that, like what was happening culturally in that first year that led to the success? And is there maybe a point in the season where you're like, hey, I think this is really starting to work?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I always, and I touched on it a little bit earlier. My biggest my biggest thing is the content, the curriculum, and the plan in place. Like if you have good content, a good curriculum, and a plan to get to execute, I believe you can create something really special. And to me, that's what overarching, like obviously we talked a little bit about the initial challenges, but overarching, if you have, I mean, you could have a garage with ice in it and get players better. You know what I mean? As long as you have the content curriculum, the plan in place to execute, I think you're on the right track. And then what we really focused on here was the people involved. So our staffing, who we hired for our strength coach, who we hired for our trainer, who we hired for our equipment manager, obviously having the resources from ownership to be able to take care of the players and provide them with just the necessary tools. Like, I mean, you hear it all the time in junior hockey. There are places that treat their players really well, and there are places that don't. And there's a direct correlation between on ice success, and that
Sure.
happened in Chicago as well.
Yeah.
So really taking away and the Toronto Marlies did it. We did it with the Soo Greyhounds. Like when you take away the excuses for the players to not be able to complain about something, and I'm not saying that you should create weak men because everything's so good all the time and there's all this entitlement. I'm not saying that at all. But just the necessities where they walk into the rink and they feel like they're happy to be there. They're excited to be there. They have the necessary tools to complete their job. And they feel good doing it. That's really, really important. So to me, it's a mesh of all of that stuff that worked here. I think, obviously having the plan, having the content, the curriculum, being able to execute on that plan, and then surrounding our players with the best people, and then giving them the resources where they felt really good about being a Youngstown Phantom, how we travel, how we eat. I mean, their gitch that they wear, their equipment, being able to provide them with an ample amount of sticks and all that stuff. Like that really is important. I firmly believe that success is measured, black and white is black and white. You know what should be done, what needs to be done, but success is measured to me in the gray area margins. And the more you can take care of the little things, and the marginal wins that you can have with your team and your organization, the better off you're going to be. And that's what we really looked to do. We wanted to make sure that our guys were comfortable. They were excited to come here. They had everything they needed. If they didn't, then we were going to do our best to make sure that we could accommodate that, within reason of them putting their best foot forward for the organization. So that was the trade-off. And the biggest thing for me is we just raised expectations. And to me, happiness is reality divided by expectations. And if your expectations are high and the reality is low, you're going to be unhappy. But when you raise expectations, you start to raise the reality of things, and then things become successful. And that's how we built this program. And it took a lot of people, and there were a lot of, different things, and we approached things very differently. And we had, an assistant coach that did partnerships, that went out and got the guys all sorts of different partnerships in the community, whether it's golf or food or, anything like that. Like we did, we tried to make this the best place to play junior hockey in order to get them ready for the National Hockey League. So, it was hard. It took a lot of work. And the guys have just kind of carried that forward, year after year of really enjoying being in Youngstown. And when your players enjoy being somewhere, it's a lot easier to get things done.
When you were hired, Murray Gunty made a comment that they were looking for somebody that was creative, offensive minded. And, it would appear like this is a crazy stat. Like your first year, you have 13 players in NHL organizations from the roster of that first year team, which is remarkable. And so it would seem that, that was, you've been able to sort of carry that forward. But it's hard. I think it's harder. This is my opinion, but I think it's harder to coach creativity offensively. Like the easiest thing to do is rely on just, hey, we're going to play really good defense. And that's important. Like it matters. But I think it really challenges a coach to challenge their best players to get better and really improve their skill set. So, my question would be like, how do you create an environment where those best players are challenged, and how do you maybe develop their skill sets and push them outside of their comfort zone?
Yeah, to me, it comes down to, this is going to sound crazy, but to me, it comes down to accountability. So like for the defensive side of the game is what it is. It's heart, balls, and head. Like to me, that's all it is. Like the play without the puck comes down to heart, balls, and head. And we talk about it all the time. Like you can have the ability to fail forward and be creative offensively if you do everything you can to get the puck back or fix a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think the accountability to that drives offensive creativity, because now the guys can have a longer leash with what they do offensively. Obviously some of it is like structural things where you put in parameters, but you let the guys be creative within that. But really, to me, it comes down to the willingness to do the things that you can control from a work ethic and identity standpoint that will fix a mistake that is made. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but like for me, the offensive creativity comes with taking care of the things that that you can control without the puck. And as long as our guys are giving honest efforts day in, day out with that stuff, the offensive creativity, they can have as long a leash as they want. They can make plays, and obviously ebbs and flows throughout the year. Like we went through a time period this year where we're struggling to score 5-on-5, and you have to switch it up, and you have to be willing to live with some risk taking, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully that starts rolling, and guys, they have to fail forward. Like they have to fail forward. You have to be in an environment where they're held accountable for their work ethic and not doing things that they can control, but they have to be able to make mistakes and fail forward. And without that, if guys are afraid to make plays, like you're never going to get an environment where anything gets done. And and every coach, like I'm not saying I'm perfect with that either. Like you give up a brutal goal, and you're like, the easiest thing to do is always to default to safety, right? Make sure the team is safe to not get scored on. That's the easiest thing to do as a coach, because it makes everybody look at least average, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where you have to be willing to allow them to say, I saw that, I didn't execute it, but I saw that. Or that was the right play, I just didn't execute it, right? And the best players with the confidence that if they have confidence that their coach is going to allow them to fail forward, the best players are going to go out and try that play again, and they're going to execute it. So I think that's a fine line, even like for all of us to walk. You don't want to give up a 2-on-1 on a terrible pinch, or but at the end of the day, you have to hope that the accountability and the locker room is strong enough to say, like, hey, like we have to do everything we can to cover this guy's back if he's going to make that decision. We have to do everything we can to block a big shot when maybe we're a little desperate. And I think that allows you to be a little bit more creative offensively. And then you have to, as a coach, like, and I struggle with this at times too, like you have to live with them trying things. You have to, they're way better hockey players than I'll ever be. So you have to sometimes give them the ball and say, hey, run the rock. And, sometimes it's going to work out and you're going to look good. And sometimes it's going to be like, what were you thinking? And you have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, I'd do it again.
Yeah. Well, man, just as you talk about all that, like all I can think about was like, the gold medal final we just saw at the Olympics when you got best on best, and there's like, and you see like it's one mistake, but you can't play that game unless you're willing to die on the sword, so to speak.
Well, it's funny that gold medal game, you have two total opposite tales of what we just talked about, right? You have Jack Hughes flying up the ice. You have a guy that poke checks a puck and then goes after when if he turns that over, it's a for sure 2-on-1 the other way,
Yeah.
right? But then on the flip side for Canada, and again, this is not a knock at anything, but you have Connor McDavid and Cale Makar coming back into the zone, two of the best players, if not the best players in the world, and you don't think that those guys would replay that differently in their head, whether it's taking one more stride or having better stick detail. And again, that's where it goes as a coach. Like, are you not going to have Cale Makar and Connor McDavid on the ice in that situation? Of course you are, right? But I said to our guys, I sent that clip. I said, hey, this is just so you guys can see it. The best players in the world make mistakes. They have missed reads, and they also jump on opportunities like this and get rewarded. So it's just, it's when you're in situations like that and the moment's as big as it is, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say like the pinch by Cale there. And I mean, there was a lot of, commentary on it, but it's like, man, if he doesn't make that, like you're handcuffing 80% of his game.
100%.
If you can't allow him instinctually to just make that read and go after it. Ryan, before we let you go, so when we talk to coaches who are in weekend leagues, so junior hockey, college hockey, etc., their practice schedule throughout the week is usually pretty consistent. Like Monday's a skill day, Tuesday's special team. They're playing Friday, it's the pregame skate, and Thursday's usually like a rinse and repeat practice that they do some version of all season long. But Wednesday seems to be the day where there's, coaches kind of put their stamp on the week. You guys just wrapped up a Wednesday practice. What does a Wednesday practice look like in Youngstown?
Yeah. So today was, it's a little bit different. The guys exercised. We do some, we do a segment, kind of bonus where the guys reach certain rewards. If they get 10 out of 10 points, they get a certain thing. If they get 9, whatever. So they actually had a day off. If they get 7 points on a weekend, or in a segment, they're able to pick an off day, and I can't say no. So this week is a little bit.
That's brave, man. That's
Yeah.
brave.
Yeah. So they had a day off in the bank that they exercised on Monday, and I reluctantly wasn't able to say no. But so this Wednesday's a little different. So for us today was a ton of speed, a ton of puck touches. We had a little bit of compete, really just getting up to speed for the weekend. Yesterday was more of a skills day where usually for us, our first day of the week, we do skills twice a week. So we do skill pods twice a week. Tuesday's a work day. We go hard, we compete, we set our identity, we celebrate our identity from the weekend before, or hope to celebrate the identity from the weekend before. A day like today, Wednesday, would have been puck touches, speed, a little compete, a little structure. Tomorrow, before we get on the road for Chicago, will be breakouts, offense, maybe some PP touches, and then optional morning skate on Friday. So today was speed, pace, compete, and a little bit of stuff where we have to do things under pressure.
Ryan, last one here. Like, man, you talk about your team's identity. I can't help but see the parallels between, you designing for a team that's gritty, that's hard to play against, and just looking at your career. Like, I don't think you had the trajectory that you've had without having a lot of grit and game in yourself. And I mean, you touch on just, the instance when you're with Toronto and you make the call on the offside with Carlson and Babs coming in the locker room, and Babs is the best and he's been great to us, man, but he's a competitor too. I can only imagine what that environment's like. Can you maybe just touch on, like, as we close here, like, I think good coaches generally have a lot of calluses, if that makes sense, and they got to go through some shit sometimes and come out on the other side in one piece to really take those steps. And maybe just, for any young coaches that are looking for a career, like how important have those some of those moments and exchanges been, and just becoming who you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's the most important thing, and not being discouraged by it. You have to be willing to look in the mirror and have conversations with yourself and be self-aware. And I certainly am very fortunate that I have so many people around me in my personal life and mentors that will give it to me straight and be honest with me. And without those people, there's nothing. But the moments that are your hardest, it's where you grow the most from. And I can remember we lost. We were 55-7 in Sault Ste. Marie, and we lost in the OHL finals to the Hamilton Bulldogs, who we had beaten 3 weeks earlier or 4 weeks earlier, 10-1 at home. And they ended up beating us in 6 games. And I remember thinking to myself that my life was going to end. And we were 55-7. We won 23 games in a row. We were the odd number 1 wire to wire in the CHL standings. We were odds, probably minus 700 to win the Memorial Cup. Just like, we ended up losing game 6, and I remember not going home to my house for 2 days and sleeping in my office thinking that the world was going to end. And then, you come back to life and you realize that you want to do everything in your power to never be in that situation again. And you want to grow as a coach, and you didn't do a good enough job. And I think for me, like, the letdowns of those moments push you to get better. And if you have the right mindset, then you don't quit. You just grit your teeth and you keep going. And to me, there's been so many of those moments where you're like, you know what, like, is this for me? Should I, did you realize it was going to be a 20-year grind? Like, moving all over the place. Like, but those moments make you appreciate so much more. And you can't take any moment for granted. I talk to our players all the time. Like, when these guys are 35, 40 years old, they do anything to come back to this moment and play with their buddies. And it's the same thing for a coach. Like, when you're 50 or 55 or 60 and the game's done and your career is done, and there's new young coaches that are taking your job, you'd do anything to go back behind the bench for one day. You'd do anything to ride the bus for 10 hours. You'd do anything to be with a bunch of guys that you love every day and a bunch of players that you respect and want to go to war with. And I think not losing sight of that and understanding that the hard moments, push you through to the great moments. And without those, you don't become a better coach. If everything was easy, you'd just constantly underachieve because you just think it comes easy. And going through the hard moments, it makes you a better coach. It makes you a better person. It makes you a better leader of men. And it's way more fulfilling when you do something that people will remember. And I think for me, having gone through plenty of those tough moments and coming out the other side, it honestly, it's like studying for a test. Like you feel more prepared with every moment that you go through, but it's because it's something no one can take away from you. And, those are the moments that you actually grow.
Ryan, well said, man. This has been a lot of fun. We're big fans of what you got cooking down there in Youngstown, and best of luck to you and your squad down the stretch.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron. This is great. You guys do a great job.